Hey folks, today we're going to talk about the Brain Box, which is a project that I created in my home to train my children in wisdom and virtue, to cultivate their loves and their loyalties, and to give them a seed library that they could take with them when they leave my home. So I've got 7 children from 3 to 12. She's almost 13. And here's what it looks like. And the idea is that each child will get each copy of any given book that we decide to put in the Brain Box. And the goal is to make sure that we read that we read each book that we decide to put in here. So those are the rules. Everybody gets a copy. It has to be read together as a family. And it's particularly to the end that we cultivate wisdom, virtue, and love's loyalties. And it's really great. So they'll take it with them. It'll be their seed library. So we've read some of the books already. I can see that the box, if you can get an idea of it, next to my head, okay? There's my hand for scale. The box already is too small. So we've been doing this project for a couple of years. And let's talk about what books are in it. And then down in the comments below, if there's books that you're going to read with your family, I would like to hear them, okay? The type of people that watch this video are the type of people whose recommendations I would esteem. So with that, let's jump right into the first book, which is a book we've already read together as a family, which is called A Sure Guide to Heaven. Now, obviously, the 3-year-old wasn't able to grasp all the things that are in this. The reason that this book is in here, because we're going to touch on sort of the philosophy behind each choice. The reason A Sure Guide to Heaven is in here is because, well, for one, the title. I wanted to give a book to the kid that they could grab and say, okay, this will tell me how to get to heaven. You can say, well, why don't you just give them a Bible? Well, they do each have a Bible. In fact, I'm glad that I brought that up because each one of my children has their own copy of the Reformation Heritage King James Study Bible. That's the Bible of our home. Everyone in the family has it, and it's excellent. Okay, so as part of the project, everyone gets a copy of that Bible. But I liked the title of this book. It has gone by other names in the past, and there's other books by other Puritans with the same, like, alarm to the unconverted and that sort of thing. In fact, this book might have gone by that title or a similar title in the past. And it's a book on repentance, a book on true and false conversion, the marks of a false convert, the marks of a true convert, and repentance. And so this was to fill that niche. It's a Puritan and a work on conversion, really. That's the key to that one. It's a book on conversion. The next book that we'll go over, so number 1 and number 2 so far, Reformation Heritage King James Study Bible, Sure Guide to Heaven by Joseph Alliene. Did I say the name? Joseph Alliene, Sure Guide to Heaven. These Puritan paperbacks are great. They're like really great. The next book is the Baptist Confession of Faith with the Baptist Catechism. This is published by Solid Ground Christian Books. It's a hardback, sort of this vinyl leather hardback. And each child will have the Baptist Confession. It's the finest post-Reformation confession of faith that there is. And it's the confession of our church. And so I want the kids to have it. And we've studied it together. So that one, I'd say I've taught through it in church. So whether or not that qualifies for reading it with them, we memorized the Baptist Catechism. Okay, so that's where that one stands. Here's another book that we've read. So what is this? Why is this in the Brain Box? The Baptist Confession of Faith. This thing is like a miniature systematic theology. Here we have 160 paragraphs on various Christian doctrines summarized with scripture proof texts. It's excellent. Just excellent. The Baptist Catechism, commonly asked questions answered, systematic questions covered with precision in language. One thing that I really enjoy is a quote recently that I read from B.B. Warfield, and he says, this is concerning the Westminster Shorter Catechism. He said, which Benjamin Keach's Catechism, which this is based on. One of the things he says about the Catechism is the ones who made it the setters, the ones who set it forth, were less concerned to make it easy and more concerned with making it good. And so Benjamin Keach's Catechism, or the Baptist Catechism, which is based on the Westminster's shorter catechism, is excellent. What a great little miniature systematic theology. The next book that's in the brain box and the reason, the book is called Hatchet. And there's two specific reasons why I wanted this book in here. I don't have really there's no other book like this. So it's survival fiction that I read as a kid. If you're in your 30s, you probably read this in school. And it's a story of a boy who has to survive with a hatchet. And in it, he struggles with the fact that his parents are separated. And at one point in time, he contemplates taking his life. And so there is some really heavy things in this. The fact that the parents are separated, which my kids know nothing about, right? Because my wife and I are together, we've been together. And so the fact that the child struggles with the separation of his parents is something that I wanted them to at least be exposed to and sort of have to wrestle with that brokenness which is in the world where parents split and leave each other. And so I identified with the main character as a child. My wife enjoys the story. Hatchet by Gary Paulson. Hatchet by Gary Paulson. This is the 30th anniversary edition. I don't know, this one's not going to want to focus. Okay, so Hatchet. And it's fiction, specifically fiction that shows brokenness. There's some dark themes, but at the same time, it's a great story of survival and resilience. Let's do some more fiction. And this is The Lord of the Rings with The Hobbit by J.R.R. by J.R.R. Tolkien. There's not much that needs to be said about these that hasn't already been said. One of the things that I like about it, first of all, there's not a whole lot of modern nonsense from the culture in these books. The good guys are good guys. The bad guys are bad guys. That's the strength to me. So this is my take on it. The strength of the Lord of the Rings is the good guys are good and the bad guys are bad. And there is some struggle, like obviously with Frodo, spoiler alert, turning at the end. But so there is some wrestling with moral questions by the good characters and the corrupting influences of evil upon them. But there's not like, here's what I hate about modern villains and modern storytelling is that the bad guy isn't really a bad guy. He's just misunderstood. Well, I tell you what, the orcs in these stories, they're not misunderstood. They're evil. Sauron is evil. The Eye is evil. Saruman is evil. And the good guys are good. So that's great. That's the strength of these in my mind. These we have not read yet together. So I've read them all the way through for the first time last year, and they're in the brain box. The next book satisfies the qualification of devotional. And I would say that, in all likelihood, we have read through this, but we haven't read from beginning to end through it. But we read this for family worship oftentimes. My wife reads it to the kids to begin school in the morning. And that's Charles Spurgeon's Morning and Evening. I like this edition of it. And we bought each of the children this edition of it. And here's a brief devotional. You can see, hopefully it's not washed out. Nope. This one, this has never been opened before. This is my 3-year-old's box. Okay, so these are all the books that my 3-year-old will grow into. Anyway, you can see the devotion is a morning and an evening, and it takes like 3 minutes to read these. I've timed it. It takes 3 minutes, but it's so very rich, and it will challenge you. It'll challenge you in your expression because even though Spurgeon is well known for being easily understood, he he still uses quite picturesque and sometimes poetic language. He sees beauty and he says things beautifully. Okay, and that's the strength of morning and evening, is Spurgeon's ability to see beauty, say beautifully, and always pour Christ out for needy sinners. That's the strength of morning and evening. So we've got one of those for each of the children to satisfy sort of a devotional, a category of a devotional for the children. Excuse me. Next set is the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This set we have recently read all the way through as a family for the first time this past year. And the Chronicles of Narnia are in because they're good stories. Not only do they reflect the realities of the Christian truth in the redeeming of transgression, or the conversion story of Eustace in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, or the redemption of Edmund in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or the strong theme, really evident theme of providence in The Silver Chair. What a great story of providence is The Silver Chair. The kids always think they're screwing it up. They always think they've missed every sign, and every single step along the way, they're doing it. They're doing it exactly like they should. It's great. So really, as far as Christian fiction goes, it doesn't get better than C.S. Lewis. I didn't read it as a kid. My children, it cannot be said of them that they did not read it as a children. So that satisfies Christian fiction, amazing stories, great soul food. I mean, it's steak, carrots, and cake all mixed together. That's the strength of the Chronicles of Narnia. It's cake, carrots, and steak all in one meal when you read those books. They're delightful. The next one is also by C.S. Lewis. This is the Screwtape Letters. And the purpose that this book fills, I really enjoyed it. My wife read it this year. I've probably read it twice. My wife read it this year for the first time. She did not like it. But I really liked it. Hopefully when we read it as a family, it works out better for her and everyone else. I think it was hard for her to get it, to understand it. But both me and my friend, we both read it and loved it. But she really struggled. And her friend who read it with her really struggled. So I don't know. We'll see when we read it together. I think it was really hard for them to get that it's written from the perspective of a devil. So if you don't know Screwtape Letters, it's an elder demon. It's written from the perspective of an elder demon writing to a younger demon. And in it, they're constantly devising ways to get their patient or the man whom they're to, the one that they're tempting, the Christian that they're trying to tempt, or the carnal man they're trying to keep unconverted. They're constantly scheming to get him to stumble, to fall, or to reject God, or to somehow work for the devil. And in doing so, they constantly call God the enemy. And so I don't know if it was hard for my wife to think from that it's their perspective. So when they say enemy, they're talking about God. But why did I get this book? Because I think C.S. Lewis does a great job in this book of showing the realities of spiritual warfare that goes on all around us. Are demons really sitting around having conversations like this? I don't know. Probably not. Okay? But can you believe that when you're sitting in church, they want you, that the devils are happy when you look at your neighbor's shoes and get distracted? You better believe they're happy when that happens. And that's the sort of stuff in this book, the connection between the spiritual and the physical, and tying those things together to see the realities of spiritual warfare. That's why I wanted this book. It's great. I enjoyed it, but it's in there for that reason. The connecting of the real and the spiritual into one organic whole. The next book, since this is my 3-year-old daughter's, is this book by, so Screwtape Letters. We have not read this together yet. The next book is Harvey Newcomb's How to Be a Lady. So with this, we bought How to Be a Lady for the girls and How to Be a Man for the boys, both written by Harvey Newcomb. And they're very similar, but there's some areas where they're different. And really, I wanted this. My wife read this, and she loved it. And she's like, I want to read this to the girls every year. So she loved the book. Well, since she loved it so much, I bought and she has read it through with the girls. I have not read it through with the boys. I've started it with the boys, but it's really a practical guide on living, pursuing excellence in education and virtue, and dealing with practical matters of working hard, and things like that. So really, I've thought about actually even reading it out loud to put on YouTube sometime, but because I think it's so good. But you can pick that up, How to Be a Lady or How to Be a Man. And really, I'd recommend if you're going to go buy books, go to Reformation Heritage Books. They're usually the cheapest. And that's where we buy copies of this. It's Reformation Heritage Books. You just Google that. Speaking of Reformation Heritage Books, not a sponsor, by the way. Okay. This next book is another practical book. So here's sort of like gender roles, practical with an emphasis on gender roles. Like here's a book on how to be a lady. And on the other end, we have a book called How to Be a Man. And they're not the same. Though they're very similar, they're not the same. And I think that's another strength of a book like that. It's just the title itself, sends a message that I think is important. The next book is a book on practical Christian living that we got for all the kids. And this is How to Live as a Christian. And it's edited by Joel Beeke. Now this is actually in all the Reformation Heritage Study Bibles. So there's, how many does it say? 36 clear and biblical articles. And let me just flip to some random ones. Here's an article on spiritual desertion. Here's one on the fear of God. Here's one on growing in sanctification. And here's one on witnessing for Christ. So it's lots of 36 totally broad topics. And it's about 2 to 3 pages each. And this is a very practical guide on living as a Christian. So I wanted to give this to each of the kids so that a wide range of topic would be covered in a short compass. And the articles are so good. This is one that I actually bought recently for them. This is the newest addition to the Brain Box, actually. This is one that I bought after we had read all of the essays for family worship. Not at once, obviously. Over 36 evenings, reading all those essays for family worship. And I really liked them. And my wife really liked them. We all read them with our Bibles from the back. They're in the back of the Bible. So if you want this, you could just buy a Reformation Heritage Study Bible, or you can buy it in this edition. It's the exact same thing. And it's just a bunch of practical Christian living in a short compass. And so that's what that fulfills. That's why that's in there. The next book is an illustrated children's book. So if there's any book, like I said, if there's any book that you think is missing by the time we get to the end, lots of people have recommended Knowing God. That's not in here. A number of people have recommended books by Jerry Bridges, because none of those are in here, because I've sought for recommendations in the past. So know that I do remember them. And even if you make a recommendation and it doesn't make it in the Brain Box, I could still put it in my regular library, because we've got, I don't know, over 30 bookcases in my house. So we buy books. These are, so even if we don't add it to the Brain Box, chances are if you make a good suggestion, it's going to make it in the library. The next book, however, is an illustrated Christian book. And this author, illustrator, we have many of his books in our normal library, but I liked the book so much, we bought copies of it for every single child. And that is The Wretched Stone by Chris Van Allsburg. What a story. Let me tell you what it's about. Do you want me to spoil it for you? I think if I spoiled it for you, you can read it to your kids and then experience the unveiling of it. So if you don't want it to be spoiled and you just want to buy it, flip to where you see this cover, or fast forward till you see that cover, and then you'll know it's safe. In this book, a crew upon a ship are masters of creativity, writing songs, playing instruments, writing books, having a merry old time on their ship, and one day they discover this glowing box, and everyone's captivated by it. And pretty soon all the crew starts acting weird. And pretty soon they grow hair on their faces and arms. And pretty soon they can't get away from this glowing box. And one day they lock themselves in the hull. And the captain can't crew the ship by himself. And what happens is this ship ends up, pretty sure, crashing. But the spoiler part of the book is it never says what the wretched stone is. But that light comes from it. And when lightning strikes the boat, it stops working for a while until one day, that's what it was. And the crew starts acting more normal. They don't love bananas as much. And really what happens is television has dehumanized the crew. Whoa, this is a good one. This is like a parable then, although it's not very many layers deep of parable, but this is a parable of how television and screens can zap you of your humanity. This is a great book for that, for showing the danger of screens. I think you could write rather than calling it The Wretched Stone, if Chris Van Allsburg was writing this today, maybe he could call it The Rocks in Our Pockets. And maybe not to criticize the fact that we've got these things which are incredible tools, but show the danger of them in dehumanizing us when used wrongly. They would dehumanize us when we use them wrongly. So this is a children's book, but it's in there because it's an amazing children's book that I really love, greatly illustrated, and it's about being creative. The next book is Worthy is the Lamb, which is a book of compiled Puritan poetry. My favorite, so this was one that The Wretched Stone we've read all the way through, How to Be Christian we've read all the way through as a family. Worthy is the Lamb we haven't read all the way through yet as a family, but I wanted to give them some soul food of more, sort of like Spurgeon sees beauty and says beautifully, purposefully crafting beautiful words together. For the poet is with words what a painter is with paint and brushes and canvas. The poet has words, okay? And they both create art. And this is a sort of word art then, and used to cultivate the appreciation for beauty. My favorite poem in this is Enchanted Ground by John Newton, okay? That is a great one. I was going to try and quote it for you, but I'm sure I would get it wrong. Okay. The last book in the box. So there's one book that's not in here. It's The Valley of Vision. I'd like to get that for everyone for the same reason as Worthy is the Lamb. It's just beautiful. I have a personal copy of it, but I think I wanted to get it for the kids. The last book is 21 Servants of Sovereign Joy by John Piper. And it doesn't have a bookmark in it because this is Hopes. But we're we finished John Bunyan and are on William Cooper. So we're about 200 pages into this, which is 800 pages long. So we're actually about a fourth of the way done with this. We read it on the Lord's Day afternoon, usually, after lunch sometime, maybe when the littler kids are in bed. And the purpose of this book is to be filled with biography. Okay, so it's 21 biographies. And John Piper writes biography the way that I like it, which is he writes it with a purpose. And he's very open about it. He's like, listen, this is biography, but I'm going to be honest. I want to preach to you when I tell you these stories. Okay, so he'll take an aspect like in J.C. Ryle. He'll take the manliness of J.C. Ryle and he'll sort of point out episodes or the strength of masculinity or manliness seen in J.C. Ryle. And he does that for every single one. So 21 Servants of Sovereign Joy, it's to cover biography. And biography, though, like theological and doctrinal biography, which is the kind of biography that I enjoy reading. So that is all for the brain box. If you have any suggestions, like I said, do please let me know, and understand any suggestions you make, you're also making to other people, so you could serve others in that way. If you have any questions on other questions on specifically why I chose certain books, I'm sure I missed details and said crazy things that didn't make sense. But so if you want clarification or more information, feel free to ask. I would be more than willing to help. So that's the brain box. The idea, once again, is one book per child, to read it with them before they leave the house, and to be a sort of seed library for them, all specifically picked for reasons like, here the good, like Tolkien, the good and the bad. Here's the practical book of how to live a Christian life. Here's biography. Here's spiritual warfare. You see what I'm sort of going for? All sorts of things sort of touched on. So if you see a gaping hole, let me know. And until next time, I wish you well.